I'm not all that sure why, but recently I've been thinking a decent amount about the Toronto Raptors, and it was probably because I was still clinging on to any bit of hope that they could make the 8th seed and then go up against the Philadelphia 76ers. Because there's one thing I know for certain is that the 76ers would not have wanted to face the Raptors. That is for certain. But it's also for certain that that's not going to happen, and we've got to move on. And, well, I'm going to look forward to next year, because I think this is a season where you can look at a lot of issues the Raptors have had and said, that's not going to happen next year. I mean, one thing is they're not going to play in Tampa Bay next year, at least I don't think they are. I don't think any player will actually sign up to play next season if they have to go back to Tampa Bay. But there's some other things as well, which obviously I'm going to get into, but there's just a number of reasons why I think this is a complete anomaly, the season the Raptors have just had, and going into next year, they should get back to their best and get back to being one of the best teams in the NBA, which they have been for what? How many years? 6 or 7 years prior to this season. And I'm going to talk about all of those things. Before I do that, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new, or if you're not, it would be much appreciated. It just helps out how the videos go, so that would be cool. But anyways, let's get into it. I think for us to understand why the Raptors had a bad season and why they're going to bounce back next season, we have to just look at a few things that went wrong. And I alluded to it before. Obviously, they played in Tampa Bay, and obviously that's a pretty big difference. And for a team that over the 3 years prior to this season had a home record of 92-26. Yes, 92-26. Ridiculous numbers. And this season have had one of 16-19. Compiling as many losses in 35 games this year as they did in the 2 seasons prior. So there was a big difference in how they performed this season at home and how they had performed in the 3 years prior. They go from a team that had one of, if not the best home records in the entire NBA to playing in a completely different country and state. So I think that's a pretty huge difference that we have to factor in. And another person that had a very, very negative impact on the team was unfortunately this man himself, yes, Aaron Baines, an Australian resident, but I mean, Toronto don't claim him because he had a season from hell. It was absolutely terrible. I mean, his impact was, he was impactful just in the complete wrong way. I think he was statistically the worst player in the NBA. So that's the kind of impact he had. And to go from having Marcus Gasol, Serge Ibaka, to then having Aaron Baines, to say it was a failure would be putting it lightly. It would be like being a security guard at your first day of work and just letting someone walk in and take, as many bags as they want straight out of the store without any threat, without any resistance. They just walk in, they walk out with everything for free. That would be like Aaron Baines in Toronto. And, well, he was a huge reason why they started 2-8, which also could have gone differently. They had 2 shots by Pascal Siakam at the end of games that rimmed in and out that would have won them the game. 2 shots that could have turned them from a team that went 2-8 through the first 10 games to a team that went 4-6, and all of a sudden we might be talking about this team in a different light. But that's just kind of how the season went for Toronto. Just a couple of shots here and there, just a couple of bad players here and there, a couple of terrible signings here and there, and all of a sudden you go from a team that won 53 games in a shortened season last year to a team that now has the 7th best odds at a top pick, which we're going to talk about, because that's pretty crucial in terms of my hopes for their next season, them getting a high draft pick. But I don't want to focus too much on this year. Basically, to put it simply, they had a terrible start to the season. They signed a terrible center to replace guys that were very impactful for them. And also they had injuries, not just playing away from home, but they had injuries. You look through the first 30 or so games of the season, they were 17-15. And then from March through to May, they have not been able to stay healthy. And as a result, their record has suffered as well. So you look at a team that had injuries, that had a bad signing in Aaron Baines that was just terrible for this team. I can't emphasize that enough. And was playing away from home. So many factors that go into it. And you can see why I'm pretty optimistic that if you just get rid of a few of those factors, which should be gone, Aaron Baines has a team option. He's going to be gone. They're hopefully going to be back in Toronto. Hopefully they're going to stay healthy. That's not something we can predict or forecast, but I would hope that would happen. And even if it doesn't happen, a silver lining that has come out of them having injuries and having to play different players is the fact you've got guys like Malachi Flynn, who over the last 20 games has averaged about 10-4 or nearly 40% from 3 and has finally got some opportunity. You've even got someone like like Yuta Watanabe and DeAndre Bembry, who are only making a combined $3.5 million, and a solid rotational pieces, amongst other guys that have proven themselves to be solid players that can help this team out. Obviously, Chris Boucher had a huge breakout season. These things might not have happened if they didn't have injuries or so many struggles. So there are silver linings that you can take from this year and take into next season. And another silver lining is Khem Birch, who hasn't signed for next year, but he's from Canada. Apparently, it was his dream to play for the Raptors, and he's having a career best year in Toronto, averaging 11-7 in less than 30 minutes a night. He's been relatively reliable on minimal shooting from three, but it looks like a solid shot. He shoots around 70% from the free throw line, so I could see it translating. And again, it's just a big upgrade on what they had earlier in the season. And even like someone like Freddie Gillespie has been solid. OG Anunoby can guard centers. Pascal Siakam can play small ball as well. Now you've got a little bit of versatility, and you've got someone who hopefully, if they re-sign Khem Birch, that'll be a huge difference from what they had at the start of the season in Aaron Baines, who was averaging 5-5 on under 40% from the field and under 20% from three through the first 10 games of the season. Yeah, those were his numbers. But looking at the more significant pieces on the roster, it looks like the GOAT, the Raptors GOAT himself, Kyle Lowry, will be departing. But outside of that, it looks like they'll now have space to re-sign Gary Trent Jr., which I imagine they'll be doing. Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, and Khem Birch will likely be the starting lineup next season. I mean, Khem Birch could be replaced by someone else, but someone along that kind of mold. I don't think they'll go all out on a center unless they were to get someone like Evan Mobley in the draft, which would be huge, but we'll talk about the draft in just a little bit. But just looking at that starting lineup, you've got about three guys in OG, Pascal, and Fred VanVleet that are borderline all-star level players. They're 20-point per game scorers. I think OG will make that leap next year. He made a leap this season. He's already one of the best defenders in the entire NBA. Pascal Siakam found a bit of form, although he struggled from three. In general, he had a decent season. It was a bit underwhelming considering he'd got better, and then kind of plateaued / got a little bit worse, which is why it was seen as a terrible season, when in reality, it wasn't that bad. But I think if all of a sudden you can add someone alongside him that can actually shoot, maybe Khem Birch, if he can be that guy, and then you bring in Gary Trent Jr. who can shoot as well, OG makes another leap, and Pascal's not relied on to be that guy, because I don't think he is that guy, but he could still be like a really good second option on this team, who hopefully doesn't have to shoot too much or can find his shooting rhythm again. And you've got other guys like Fred VanVleet, like I mentioned. All of these guys have something in common as well. Defensively, they're all good. There's no one on this team that's lacking defensively, and that's where they're going to look to build their identity. Last season, they were one of the best defenses in the league. Even this season, through the games before they struggled with a lot of injuries, they were the 13th ranked defense, which is still underwhelming for the Raptors, but it goes to show in a season where pretty much everything went wrong up until they had a ton of injuries. They were the 13th ranked defense. Even after all these injuries, they're still average in the league. So even with everything going wrong, they've been an average defense. So I could easily see them jumping back into like a top 8 defense, maybe a top 5 defense with someone like OG Anunoby with the skill he has and all the guys around him. If you can get enough rim protection out of Khem Birch, out of Chris Boucher, out of Freddie Gillespie, then you should be a top 5 to top 8 defense, and that's where they're going to be able to pick up wins. You look at a team like the New York Knicks, they've surprised a lot of people. Now think of that. Now think of the Raptors. I think the Raptors have a little bit more of a track record than the Knicks, and I would suggest if they can get it all working, they should be an elite defense and also a pretty good offense as well. I really don't have many doubts over this team. They've also got a 30% chance at a top 4 pick. This team already, which I think is pretty talented and pretty young. All of these guys are pretty young. You could add in a Jalen Green, you could add in a Cade Cunningham, an Evan Mobley, Jalen Suggs, pretty much anyone. Even in the top 8, it doesn't matter. Any of those talented top 8 guys, a top 4 player in particular, and you add to this team, all of a sudden, those guys are probably going to look like stars straight away with the development record the Raptors have, and you add them into a mix of guys that are all defensive-minded and can all help you out in terms of they like to move the ball, they like to create open shots. It's just going to be a great situation for anyone that gets drafted there, and Toronto haven't had a top pick in a long time. They haven't had a top pick in a long time, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with that pick, and I think if they were to get blessed with a top 4 pick, it could be a game changer. This could be the difference between them being, like a 6th seed for the next few years to potentially being a top 3 seed if they were to get someone like a Cade Cunningham or an Evan Mobley. Probably not as soon as next year because they'll need a little bit of time to embed themselves, but going forward, that could be the difference. That's the ceiling raiser. That top pick is the ceiling raiser. So if the Raptors were to somehow get their hands on that pick, which they've got a decent chance at doing, I think that's the difference between them being good again and potentially great again. Look, I've always been pretty positive on the Raptors. They let me down this season, but I don't really see a world in which they're not a playoff team next season, unless they were to do something dramatic, which I don't see happening. I think they're going to get back to their ways. They're going to be a top defense again, which is where it's going to start from, and they're going to be good enough offensively with a leap from the likes of OG Anunoby. If they were to somehow get lucky in the draft and get Cade Cunningham or Evan Mobley, like the Raptors won the 2nd most games in the East without a genuine superstar last season, what if they get one in the draft? That's all I'm saying. Anyways, if you did enjoy the video, a like would be greatly appreciated. Have a good day. Catch you next time. Bye.